I've been called a lot of things over the past 5 months. A sheep, a lemming, a useful idiot, but most importantly, I've been called a teenager. You see, the past 5 months have been substantial in molding me into who I am. When the Florida Parkland shooting first happened, it wasn't like anything I've ever seen before. It was something I couldn't wrap my mind around, and I still cannot wrap my mind around. The fact that a mass shooting happened in a place where students were supposed to grow. I have never seen such a gruesome reality. Videos of people my age, fearing for their lives, flooded Twitter. Before this, I only seen such a gruesome death in movies. But when I opened up Twitter that day, I saw bullets ripping through the chests of children. These videos weren't staged. These deaths were uncalled for. These were children getting slaughtered in a place where they were supposed to thrive. That same month, my school experienced its own school shooting threat. It was my 3rd period AP US history class when this robotic code red started blaring over the intercom. 20 of us scrambled out of our desks onto the floor in front of one table because maybe that one table in the front of the classroom could stop a spray of bullets that were going to be shot at us if it was going to happen. My friends grabbed textbooks and handed them around the room. They said, "Put these in front of your stomach, just in case." 20 kids holding hands, praying in a classroom, all below the ages of 18. We sat there in a cold-blooded fear as code red echoed in the hallways, bouncing off the lockers. But throughout this whole thing, I wasn't thinking about the test I had next period or what drills to run during soccer practice after school. The only thing that kept replaying through my head was, did I tell my mom I loved her this morning? I have never felt that kind of fear in me my whole life. Even as I talk about it now, my hands start shaking and my heart starts racing because I was scared, and I still am scared. Yes, present tense, because from February 14th to March 8th, there have been 810 threats similar to Parkland's, and that's just over the span of 22 days. And it does not include the tragic Santa Fe high school shooting on May 18th. I never want anyone to have that kind of fear in their lives, and yet thousands of kids experienced that same feeling I did, and I wanted to change that. So a week later, 4 high school students met at Springfield's Indian Orchard Library on a Sunday. 4 teenagers whose fear morphed into desire to make a change in their community so that no other child would have to feel that fear. We began planning a March for a Life Sister March here in Springfield in conjunction with the March on Washington that would be held 3 weeks later. As I handed in the legal permits needed for this march 3 days after the meeting, the first thing I got asked about was my age. At that time, I was only 16, and I got looked at if I was crazy. But it was what I heard as I walked out that really got to me. Ha! A rally formed by a 16-year-old. I can guarantee you no one will go. As the days passed, we received more comments from readers like that. We had interviews with Mass Live, spoke at numerous panels in the community, and even appeared on local radio stations. And we received reader comments that were aimed to tear us down. Let them walk. They mean nothing. Their opinions only matter because their parents and the school system told them they're special. Big whoop. Or, why should we listen to the generation that eats Tide Pods? That fire that sparked inside me from the shooting dimmed down with every comment. But those 3 other teenagers that were in this with me kept kindling the fire inside of me, lifting me up and not letting me turn into ash. And I am forever grateful for that. So when 3 weeks passed since that Sunday library meeting, we bloomed from 4 teenagers to 2,000 marchers, including guest speakers such as Senator Warren and Congressman Neal. As we filled the streets, we created this ripple of energy that you could just feel throughout downtown. Thousands of teenagers holding signs, rallying for one cause, wanting to change the way our nation works. And we didn't stop there. In June, I, alongside March for Our Lives Springfield, began to help plan another march with more teenagers from March for Our Lives Boston. But this time, instead of just marching through one city, we planned on walking 50 miles in just 3 days from Worcester to Springfield. And throughout this process of planning to march 50 miles, we met resistance. The same resistance we met during the first march. We went on more media outlets, and we still received negative comments from readers solely based on our age, solely based on the fact that we were teenagers standing up for something we believe in. But I met some people who helped me push through these comments. I actually got to meet and march with Manuel and Patricia Oliver, two parents who lost their son in the Parkland shooting. They told us student marchers that they march, they rally, they do all these things so that no other parent had to feel the pain they did. They said that when they were around us students, when we were laughing, when we were marching, it filled the void that was created when their son Hakeem died. And at that point, the fear and the anger I felt towards these tragedies, Parkland, Santa Fe, San Bernardino, it morphed into sadness. I was upset that there were hundreds of parents and friends experiencing that pain, and yet little to nothing has been done as a nation to address the national gun violence epidemic that inflicts this pain and sadness on our people, on our friends. But something that Manuel said about his son really stuck to me. He said that Hakeem was not a victim, but instead an activist. An activist like us students who are marching, who wanted to hold the nation accountable, wanting to make sure no other student, no other parent, no other friend had to endure this fear and this pain. Wanting to defy the status quo. The status quo is something I want to focus on here. When I started off this talk, I said how most importantly, I was called a teenager. As a teenager, some adults didn't want to really accept the movement I was trying to create because there was a stereotype around me being a teen. They thought I was too young to understand, too young to get politics, too young to create change. So that led me to question, when is the perfect age to create change, to voice your opinions? There is no perfect age. And when you put your mind to something, you can do it, no matter your age. If you want to create change, you have to do it now. And that's what this generation is realizing. These teenagers are looking out at the world, and they're seeing the faults and are seeing the things that they want to change. For me, it was making sure no one had to feel the fear I experienced. For Patricia Manube, she recognized a severe lack of funding in some schools and created dream boxes. Boxes that consisted of school supplies, which she shipped out to various communities and students in need. For Malala, it was fighting for girls to get the education and the future that they deserved because they were being deprived from it solely based on their gender. For Gavin Grimm, it was fighting for LGBTQ rights after he was ridiculed and taken to court for using the boys' restroom since he is transgender. But you see, these topics wouldn't have been pushed to the front of the burner if it wasn't for the communities that rallied with these individuals. It takes one person to set the motion forward, but it takes a community to keep up the momentum. And one thing I really believe is that strength comes in numbers. Let's take the March for Our Lives movement, for example. It was created by a small group of Parkland students, but what made it truly revolutionary was the sheer amount of students that rallied for this cause. 800,000 students nationwide, from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, California, to here, Springfield, Massachusetts, marched and rallied for their voices to be heard, pushing the message that this wasn't just a moment, that it was a movement. 1% of kindergarten through 12th graders showed up to march, and yet that 1% has called a multitude of change. It led to gun control being a topic we couldn't ignore, and even pushed state legislators to pass red flag, common sense gun laws. It led to thousands of high schoolers registering to vote. It led to a nation realizing that teenagers can cause change when they put their mind to it. And all this from 1% of America's student population. There is great strength in 1%. If 1% of Springfield were to go up and defy the status quo, that would be another 1,500 activists. If 1% of the world decided to stand up today and push for a cause, letting their passion guide them to create change in their community for the better, that would be another 75 million activists. And that is why I am standing here today, asking you to be a part of that 1%. Be a part of the side of change. Be the person that defies the status quo. Because you aren't too young, you aren't too old, you aren't too anything. Because change has no restrictions, and change has no limits. So go out there today and defy the status quo, and be the change you want to see. My name's Chanvong. I'm a rising high school senior, a daughter, a sister, a friend, an activist, a teenager. But most importantly, I am a part of the 1%. Thank you.